Karen Matthews ruled Whispering Pines with an iron fist disguised in a pastel cardigan. As the self-appointed guardian of suburban perfection, she wielded the HOA handbook like a holy text, citing obscure bylaws with religious fervor. Lawn too long. Violation. Holiday lights still up in January? Violation. A basketball hoop visible from the street? Heaven forbid. Double violation with a warning. Residents grumbled, whispered, and even plotted, but none dared cross Karen directly. Her reputation for pettiness was matched only by her persistence. She walked the neighborhood every morning like a warden on patrol, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp for the slightest deviation from the covenant codes. To Karen, the HOA wasn't just a set of guidelines, it was the last line of defense against chaos, and she was its unrelenting enforce. When my nephew Ethan came to stay with me for a few months, I knew I'd have to make some temporary modifications to my home. Ethan, 14 and full of curiosity, had cerebral palsy and used a wheelchair to get around. The front steps were a barrier to his independence, so I had a removable ramp installed. It wasn't permanent or unsightly, just a simple aluminum structure that allowed Ethan to enter and exit the house safely. I notified the HOA out of courtesy, assuming there wouldn't be an issue since the Americans with Disabilities Act protected such accommodations. But the ramp had barely been in place a day when I received a formal notice, complete with Karen's signature at the bottom and her usual passive-aggressive tone. The letter claimed the ramp was an unauthorized structure that violated the HOA's aesthetic standards and demanded it be removed immediately, or I'd face a $50 per day fine until it was gone. I tried to reason with her. I explained that Ethan's ramp was not some random addition but a reasonable accommodation under the ADA, a federal law that superseded HOA bylaws. I even printed out legal documentation and offered to provide a letter from Ethan's doctor. But Karen wasn't interested in listening. Her eyes darted over the paperwork like it was in another language, and she simply repeated, with a tight smile, "The bylaws are clear." She accused me of using Ethan's condition as an excuse to bypass protocol, and insisted that if I didn't remove the ramp, the HOA would take further action. I remember standing on my porch, fuming, as she strutted away like she had just vanquished a threat to neighborhood order, her heels clicking with each triumphant step. The next morning, the ramp was gone. At first, I thought maybe one of the workers had removed it temporarily for some unrelated reason. But then I found the crushed remains of it behind the maintenance shed, bent metal, torn grip tape, and twisted brackets, like it had been tossed carelessly into a dumpster. Ethan was stuck inside, unable to leave the house without someone physically carrying him down the steps. His face crumpled with disappointment, and I felt helpless, furious, and humiliated all at once. This wasn't just a violation of neighborhood rules, it was theft. Destruction. A direct assault on my nephew's independence and dignity. I took pictures, documented everything, and called the police to file a report. Karen had crossed a line, one that came with legal consequences. I contacted an ADA lawyer that same afternoon. As soon as I described the situation, he confirmed what I had suspected. Karen's actions weren't just petty, they were illegal. Removing a disability ramp without consent, especially one used by a minor with mobility challenges, was a violation of both federal and state laws. The fact that she was enforcing HOA rules in a way that discriminated against a disabled resident made it even worse. With his guidance, I gathered every piece of documentation I had, emails, the violation notice, photos of the destroyed ramp, even security camera screenshots that might show Karen or her proxies near the house. We drafted a formal complaint to the Department of Housing and Urban Development and prepared to sue the HOA if necessary. I wasn't just doing this for Ethan anymore. I was standing up for every resident Karen had ever bullied under the guise of order. As the police began their investigation, I wasn't the only one speaking up. Word spread fast in Whispering Pines, and before long, other neighbors started sharing their own unsettling experiences with Karen. One elderly couple recounted how she'd fined them for installing a handrail along their front steps after one of them fell. Another woman, whose teenage son used a service dog, claimed Karen had tried to impose a pet violation against them, despite clear ADA protections. It was as if any visible reminder of disability was an eyesore in Karen's perfectly curated community. And she didn't just cite the rules, she twisted them, weaponized them, always cloaking her actions in the language of order and regulation. But now, people were no longer afraid. Karen's obsession with control had finally overstepped into criminal territory, and the cracks in her authority were determined to hold her accountable. I requested an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't sure what would happen, but with the backing of neighbors and my lawyer's encouragement, I knew it was time to push back. The meeting hall buzzed with energy the night of the gathering. People filled every seat, standing along the walls, whispering to one another. Karen sat at the head of the long table, her expression unreadable, flanked by the few remaining board members still loyal to her. I brought a thick folder of documentation, including high-resolution photos, police reports, a letter from my lawyer, and a typed statement outlining what had happened. I even included a bluff, a screenshot from a security camera that might have caught someone disposing of the ramp. When I placed it on the table and slid it toward her, her face paled slightly. That was my first sign that she knew exactly what she'd done. T was the maintenance worker, Ramon, who finally cracked. Maybe he felt the pressure in the room, or maybe his conscience got the better of him. Either way, after a few minutes of tense back and forth, he cleared his throat and confessed that Karen had personally instructed him to remove the ramp. She told him it was abandoned junk and ordered him to haul it off with the weekly bulk trash. He said he hesitated. He'd seen the boy in the wheelchair, but Karen assured him that it was unauthorized and not worth the trouble. His statement hit the room like a thunderclap. A few people gasped. Someone cursed under their breath. Karen tried to interrupt, tried to cast doubt on Ramon's honesty, but the damage was done. Her veneer of respectability was cracking right there under the fluorescent lights, and not even her usual smugness could patch it back together. Within days, the police followed up on the new testimony and pressed charges. Karen Matthews was officially arrested for theft and destruction of medical equipment. Serious charges, made worse by the ADA violation attached to them. The mugshot of her, still in her pressed blouse and pearls, made its way around the neighborhood in texts and group chats. The woman who had once terrorized residents with citations and fines was now facing the legal system she had long pretended to be above. The prosecutor wasn't interested in leniency either. The case had caught attention beyond our little neighborhood. This wasn't just about a ramp, it was about systemic discrimination, abuse of authority, and a total disregard for basic human decency. The charges could lead to prison time, though her lawyer quickly began negotiations for a plea deal in an effort to avoid a trial. Eventually, the district attorney offered Karen a deal. No prison, but she'd serve 6 months under house arrest. Ironic, given her obsession with appearances. She'd also face 2 years of probation, pay full restitution for the ramp and related damages, and complete 200 hours of community service, preferably with disability advocacy groups, the DA suggested with pointed sarcasm. Most satisfying of all, as part of the deal, Karen was permanently barred from serving on any HOA board again. Her reign at Whispering Pines was officially over. She signed the agreement with trembling hands, no longer the smug authoritarian but a woman forced to reckon with the consequences of her cruelty. The same neighbors who once tiptoed around her now watched her with open disdain. Her power was gone, her reputation in ruins, and her legacy permanently stained. In the days following Karen's fall from grace, the atmosphere in Whispering Pines shifted palpably. People who once avoided eye contact or whispered grievances behind closed doors now smiled at each other on their morning walks. The neighborhood group chat, once a graveyard of passive-aggressive reminders about garbage bins and hedges, turned into a place of mutual support and shared relief. It was as if a fog had lifted. I used part of Karen's restitution payment to install a new, sturdier ramp for Ethan, one with reinforced rails and a non-slip surface, professionally designed and ADA compliant in every way. This time, there were no objections, no violation notices, no sneering comments from passing neighbors. Instead, I received handwritten notes of support, baked goods from the Johnsons 2 doors down, and a quiet thumbs up from Ramon, who'd since submitted his resignation from the HOA maintenance crew. Ethan beamed when he saw the new ramp, his independence restored, his dignity intact. It wasn't long before a "for sale" sign appeared in front of Karen's meticulously trimmed hedges. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a stark white board with red lettering that shouted what Karen could no longer admit: she had lost. The woman who once policed lawn ornaments with the zeal of a border agent was now preparing to flee the very community she tried to micromanage into submission. She rarely left her house, only peeking through blinds as neighbors passed. The same people who once nodded politely now walked their dogs with pointed detours around her driveway. Her former allies on the HOA board distanced themselves quickly, eager to preserve their own reputations. Her control was broken, and in its place stood a neighborhood rediscovering what it meant to live, and let live. The legal resolution didn't erase what had happened, but it sent a message. Karen had treated the HOA as her personal kingdom, enforcing rules with selective cruelty and disguising her biases as policy. But the law, real law, had finally caught up with her. The ADA wasn't just a suggestion, and people with disabilities weren't inconveniences to be brushed aside. Ethan's ramp wasn't an eyesore, it was a necessity, a lifeline, and a symbol of dignity. And now, thanks to a collective stand from the residents of Whispering Pines, that truth had been carved into the history of the community. More than a few neighbors expressed interest in running for the newly restructured HOA board. For the first time in years, there was hope that leadership might actually serve everyone, not just one woman's idea of perfection. Ethan, meanwhile, thrived. With the new ramp in place and the neighborhood finally calm, he found joy in exploring the outdoors again, racing the dog down the sidewalk, chatting with a friendly widow across the street, and even helping me plant flowers along the walkway. He told me one afternoon, while sipping lemonade on the porch, "It feels like everyone can breathe here now." He wasn't wrong. The incident had sparked something beyond just legal justice. It had reminded people of their shared humanity. We'd rallied, spoken out, and forced accountability, and in doing so, made the neighborhood better not just for Ethan, but for every quiet voice Karen had once tried to silence. And as for Karen Matthews? Her story ended not with the satisfaction of vengeance, but with the cold clarity of consequence. The woman who once believed herself above reproach was now just another disgraced name in a cautionary tale, one that Whispering Pines wouldn't soon forget. Her house sold quickly, perhaps to a family less obsessed with conformity and more interested in kindness. On moving day, she stepped onto her porch one last time, glancing at the ramp she had once destroyed and the boy she had tried to marginalize. Ethan waved to her. She looked away. Some lessons come gently. Others arrive with police officers, public shame, and a legal record. Either way, the result was the same. Her reign was over. The HOA handbook might have once been her gospel, but now, finally, she had learned the only law that truly mattered was the one she could never bend, the law of basic human